Okay, so we have finished consumption, and now we're going to talk a little bit about E. coli. So E. coli is this organism right here, just a cute little bugger. Um, Lives in us. Lots of it lives in us. We have a lot of E. coli in our gut, one of the most prominent bacteria that we have in our gut, and it's helpful to us in most cases. There are, however, some bad ones, and the bad ones are the ones we're going to talk about. So E. coli typically colonizes human infants within a few hours after birth. So just by kissing your baby touching your skin, you're touching your fingers, anything, that E. coli just gets right into them, and it colonizes them, and that's a good thing. So E. coli and humans have a commensal relationship. You might remember that symbiotic relationship, which means we both benefit. They live primarily in the large intestine of the mammalian colon. What's that noise? I'm outside, obviously. Um, anyway, they're in lots of other mammals. Sorry, I may have to stop. Okay, we'll go on. So E. coli itself has won 11 Nobel Prizes. Isn't that something that a bacterium has won Nobel Prizes? So in 1958 for bacterial sex, which is the sex pili, I think we talked about. By the way, E. coli can share genes within one another. In 1959 for DNA replication. Just this you can read this in the PowerPoint if you want. But I just find it fascinating that a bacterium has won 11 Nobel Prizes, more than anybody else. So mutualism. So this is mutualism is the relationship. So we metabolize ingestible or bacteria. The E. coli bacterium is able to metabolize some of the compounds that are indigestible to us. By having so many of them in our gut, they help to defend against opportunistic pathogens. So, like we swallow 5 salmonella bugs, they don't get a chance to make us sick because the E. coli is there to prevent them from taking hold. Also, the host, us, provide the bacterium with a nice set of food all the time. So by us eating, all of that food goes into our gut and is absorbed, but the bacteria get some of it too. So we're happy to share. Now the bad guy. The bad guy is called pathogenic E. coli, and this came about, oh gosh, I think it was in the 90s. So this was the first bad E. coli. And this, you can get it in an extremely low infectious dose, so less than 100 cells. So most of us can see about zero point 0.1 millimeter. So if you look at a millimeter, well, centimeter is about the size of, like width of a finger, something like that. So a millimeter is 1/10 of that. And uh, the ability to see one, 0.1 or a tenth of that is not, we're not able to see. But then if you look at this, which is 0.0001, or a thousandth of a millimeter, you can see how little it is. So this is a cantaloupe, and on the right hand side I have cantaloupe, and I've zoomed in on the cantaloupe skin. So can you see the red dot anywhere on here? There is a red dot on that picture, and that is how big the an infectious dose is of pathogenic E. coli. I'm not going to point it out to you. If you want to look, you can go to the PowerPoint and you can enlarge this slide and see if you can find it. So pathogenic E. coli's infections in the United States, there have been about 250,000 illnesses and about 100 deaths. And 40% of them are caused by this strain of E. coli, 0157H7. So this particular E. coli has an incubation period of about 3 or 4 days after you ingest it. And then the bacteria bind to your intestinal mucosa, and they release a toxin. It's called a Shiga toxin, after another disease called Shigella, which makes a bad toxin as well. So this toxin disrupts protein synthesis in our epithelial cells. And so it causes the cells to die. We slough off the mucosa and we get bloody diarrhea, because we don't have an intestinal mucosa there anymore to protect us. So we start bleeding into our intestine. So what are the virulence factors of this nasty bug. So there's several types of fimbriae that it has, which allows it to colonize the small intestine and the urethra. Remember, I said most of our E. coli is in the large intestine, some in the small intestine, but this one goes after our small intestine. And there it secretes toxins, and it also secretes proteins that disrupt eukaryotic processes. Remember, this is a prokaryote. So if it disrupts eukaryotic processes, they're likely going to be very different than its own processes because it is a prokaryote. So cell division, protein synthesis, and many more are attacked by this nasty bug. So here are some E. coli's. These are all, well, not all of them, but there are 6 different strains of E. coli here. There are lots of different strains. This organism mutates faster than anything. Most bacteria do because their life cycle is only 20 minutes or so, and they can reproduce again. And so obviously they're recombining DNA and all their genetic material very rapidly. So, more mutations can happen. So you can see the fimbriae arrangements on some of these, like the one, well, you can just see there's some have lots, some have it all over, some have, just a few, if you will. So disease symptoms typically last 5 to 7 days, and that's if you live. You will have severe stomach cramps, you'll have bloody diarrhea, vomiting, and sometimes a fever. But because it's kind of sequestered away in the intestine, you don't always have a fever like you would if it's, like inside your body somewhere else. So what are the disease outcomes? Well, obviously there's recovery. After about a week, you will feel better and you'll just be back to normal. Or you could have chronic colonization with post-symptomatic shedding. So what this means is that your body feels better, but the bug sticks around. And so you're going to continue to shed this bacteria in your stool. And therefore, you have a persistent risk of transmission. And you can also be reinfected. So if your hands are not clean, then you can get reinfected and then it takes over everything again. And then the last one, which is the most serious, is called hemolytic uremic syndrome. So hemolytic means, lytic means to break or lyse, and that's hemo, so it's blood, so it breaks up your blood. And uremic means your kidney. So hemolytic, breaking up your blood, and your kidney syndrome. So it develops in about 10 to 15% of cases, and it typically develops about 7 days after your symptoms. So you're starting to feel better, and then all of a sudden you start getting worse. Well, your diarrhea improves, but then you're not urinating. Then you start having blood in your urine, and then you're very tired, and then you start losing the pink color in your cheeks and inside eyelids, and a lot of that is due from the blood loss. You start getting small unexplained bruises or bleeding at your nose and mouth, irritability, confusion, seizures, high blood pressure, swelling, your face, your hands, your feet, or your entire body. So what's happening is your blood cells are being destroyed, and then all of the fluids are pass through the kidneys. So the small blood vessels in your kidneys where these broken cells flow, they clog up or they damage your kidneys by kind of filling them up. The tubules in the kidneys are super small, and so then they form clots in these blood vessels. They use up the platelets. Remember long ago when we talked about blood cells, there were platelets, and those are the ones that help your blood to clot. So by creating all these tiny little clots all over your body from these broken blood cells, you use up those clotting agents, which is why you start getting bloody noses and you start getting bruises because your body isn't able to do its normal processing of clotting your blood when it needs to, because all of these platelets have been used up. So then all of these clots and all these broken blood cells clog up the filtering system in the kidney. And then you have kidney failure. And kidney failure can be life-threatening if you can't get out the toxins, get rid of the toxins in your body. The toxins stay and you can die. So you get hemolytic uremic system, and it's the most common cause of acute renal failure in children. So there's our bad bug on the other side, Mr. E. coli H70157, and it has a Shiga-like toxin. It's also called a virotoxin. You get abdominal pain, bloody diarrhea, fever. Seizures in children often is more common in children, and lethargy, which just means, you don't just want to lay around. Then you can see on the right that you have these microangiopathic hemolytic anemia schistocytes. So a schistocyte just means kind of like a broken red blood cell. And then you get thrombocytopenia, and penia means lack of. So thrombocyte, that's the platelets. You have lack of those, and then you have renal insufficiency. So it's just a really bad cascade of events. It requires immediate hospitalization, and if they can, they usually can do dialysis on your blood and allow you to recover. And you can recover from this usually within a couple of weeks, but some people do suffer permanent damage and die. Obviously, this is an emergency, and you need to get to the hospital right away if you suspect this. So the principal reservoir of this nasty bug is the bovine or the cow intestinal tract. So if you eat undercooked hamburgers, sausages, unpasteurized milk, unpasteurized juices, some fruits and vegetables that are found in the ground where they might use cow manure. Those are susceptible, and sprouts as well. So all of those things can be dangerous. Then there's also been numerous outbreaks in recreational water. So typically in like a farm pond where people swim, there may be some of these bacteria that get in there and you accidentally swallow it. And remember, it doesn't take very much to infect you. So you just, like a droplet can cause you a great deal of problems. There's also person-to-person transmission. Let's say you're taking care of your child and you're cleaning their diaper or you're helping them out the toilet. Then you can become infected from that. And then also farm animals. Remember, it's a cow disease. So petting zoos, oftentimes these animals, as you can see here, cows and sheep and goats and all kinds of other animals will interact together. And if a cow poops and, other animals are in the area, well, they can have it and transmit it as well. So what should we do? Wash our hands, obviously. So here's just a little graphic. First, we have a cow up on the upper left, and the cow ingests the bacterium. The cow poops the bacterium, and then it contaminates the environment. So the environment can then, at number 3, contaminate food, fruit and vegetables, runoff water, manure, all those kinds of things. And then it can contaminate fruits and vegetables grown in the ground or around the ground. And then obviously, if we eat the beef that is contaminated, then we're at risk there. And then finally, we can transmit it from person to person. Prevention, hand washing, that I don't know if I've told you this before, so forgive me if I have. When I worked at the medical school, I was working first in the laboratory, and one of the other persons working there was doing a microbiology lab. And so she asked everybody to put their hands on a piece of agar to show how much bacteria grew on them. And mine was basically sterile. And, that's because I am a microbiologist and I do wash my hands fairly frequently. So anyway, just a little aside, hand washing is very important. So always wash your hands before and after preparing or eating food. Anytime you have contact with any kind of animals, if you are using feeding bottles or infant and toddler foods or sippy cups or anything like that, particularly pacifiers and teethers, I've seen people pick those up off the ground. Gross. You can use alcohol-based sanitizers if they have greater than 60% alcohol, and they will reduce the germs and stuff, but they are not a substitute for soap and water. So, like when I'm shopping or I'm getting gas, I come back in my car and I, put the alcohol gel on my hands, but I still, don't eat anything. I get home and I wash my hands before I do that. So sorry, I'm harping on it, but it really is helpful. So what else do? You wash your fruits and vegetables. I mean, a lot of people don't wash watermelon. They don't wash cantaloupe, but guess what? I wash it with soap and water. And also, I cook my meats thoroughly, and you should too. Your steaks and roast should reach an internal temperature of greater than 145 degrees. You should cook your ground beef and your pork up to 160 or more, and you should use a thermometer. You shouldn't really rely on color because it doesn't always tell you the truth. I mean, it's better than nothing if you cook it to well done, or you can't see pink, but a food thermometer is better. I don't use it usually for my ground beef, but for my roasts I do use it. And then also, you probably know this, you don't want to cross contaminate in food prep areas. If you make some hamburgers, you don't want to set down and slice some lettuce on top of it or something. I know that's really extreme, but if you're just aware that what is touching what, that will help. And then, of course, you need to clean your hands after you handle any of these food substances. You have to clean the cutting boards and utensils and everything after touching raw meat. And then also avoid raw milk, unpasteurized dairy products, and unpasteurized juices. I have a home up in Pollock Pines, and a lot of the farms up there sell fresh apple cider, which people love. But if it's unpasteurized, I don't drink it because these are kind of farm areas. Some cases, I may sound like a germaphobe, but if you've been a microbiologist for 20 years, 30 years, you've seen pretty much everything. So I like to just keep the bacteria. I love bacteria, but they should live in their area and I should live in mine, except for the E. coli that I like. Anyway, so if you're swimming in a lake, a pond, a stream, even a swimming pool or a backyard kiddie pool, don't swallow the water. Try very hard not to swallow the water. You can't always prevent that, and most pools have a lot of good hygiene. They have chlorine and stuff in them, so that helps to kill the bacteria. But the kiddie pool is like, a lot of times those are sitting outside for a long time, so who knows what's growing there. Anyway, contact your healthcare provider if you have diarrhea for more than 3 days, and if you have a fever of greater than 102 degrees. If you have bloody diarrhea, or if you have vomiting where you cannot keep even sips of liquid down, or very little urine. Particularly if you have bloody diarrhea or diarrhea for about 7 days, you start feeling a little bit better, and then you start being unable to produce urine. That's medical emergency, and you want to get to the hospital. So also, I've mentioned this 2 or 3 times. I guess I must think it's important. Avoid raw, unpasteurized dairy products and unpasteurized juices. Don't swallow water. Lakes, ponds, streams, swimming pools, backyards, kiddie pools. I think I must have had a couple of duplicate slides here, so sorry. So what is the treatment if you do get this? Well, first of all, it's rest. You want to try and ingest as many fluids as you can to prevent dehydration. And then fatigue. It doesn't usually require antibiotics except in the elderly or in the young who have weaker immune systems and aren't able to fight this off as well. They are trying to develop a vaccine because it is becoming more common. And this is my hard pass. You can see any kind of that when I look at that meat, that says bacteria to me. That says, ugh, I'm going to get sick. And so does this unpasteurized juice. You can see on the label there, it says unpasteurized, and they're required to note that. But anyway, those are just gross to me. Anyway, thanks for listening. I'll see you back here again sometime soon.